Welcome to Essential English Only.
Your practical English lessons in podcast format.
Hi, I'm Alex, your practical English teacher, the one who doesn't waste your time.
Hi, I'm Alex, and this is Essential English Only, the channel where you learn English in a different way. Here, you don't need to memorize complicated grammar or spend hours studying. You just need to listen, relax, and let English become part of your day. Every video is a moment to learn new words and expressions through real stories. Stories that teach, inspire, and help you understand English naturally. Today, we are going to dive into an incredible story. A story that begins with problems and ends up changing the way the world travels. A story about courage, innovation, and the power of believing in a simple idea. This is the story of Airbnb and how three young men transformed a small apartment into a global company that completely changed the hospitality industry. It all started in 2007 in San Francisco, a city full of creativity, technology, and art, but also famous for its very high cost of living. Brian Chesky and Joe Gibbia were two friends, both designers, who had just finished college and were trying to survive while chasing their dreams. The rent was late, the bills were piling up, and the money was running out. They needed a quick solution. And then they noticed something interesting. There was a big design conference happening that week, and all the hotels in the city were fully booked. That's when one of the most simple and revolutionary ideas of modern times was born. Brian and Joe decided to turn their own apartment into a mini accommodation for visitors. They bought a few air mattresses, placed them on the living room floor, and offered breakfast in the morning. That's how the idea of air bed and breakfast was created, what later became known as Airbnb. At first, it was only a way to pay the rent, but when the first three guests arrived, something special happened. They realized that people were not only looking for a place to sleep, they wanted to connect, talk, and feel part of the city. That simple but powerful human connection became the heart of what Airbnb would later represent. Brian and Joe were fascinated by the experience. They loved the conversations, the laughter, and the feeling of cultural exchange. It made them see that traveling could be more than visiting places. It could be about living the place. They started to imagine a bigger future. What if other people also wanted to offer their homes to travelers? What if the whole world could travel this way? More personally, more humanly, more authentically. But between having a good idea and building a real business, there is a long, hard road. The two friends faced many challenges. They tried to convince investors, but most of them thought it was crazy. Who would let strangers sleep in their home, they said. Who would trust that? Still, Brian and Joe believed deeply in what they were creating. They wanted to change how people traveled, one home at a time. Soon after, they invited a third friend, Nathan Bletcherchick, a software engineer, to help them build the website and give the idea a professional structure. The three of them became a small team of dreamers, young entrepreneurs with a big vision, to transform the way people traveled, But the money didn't last long. They were still struggling, trying to survive and keep the idea alive. Investors kept saying no, and friends kept suggesting that maybe it was time to give up. Yet Brian, Joe, and Nathan refused to quit. They knew they had something valuable, even if nobody else could see it yet. And then came one of the most unusual moments in the whole Airbnb story: the cereal boxes. Yes, cereal boxes. The founders decided to raise money by creating special limited edition breakfast cereals inspired by the U.S. presidential election of 2008. They called them Obama O's and Captain McCain's O's. The boxes had fun designs and caricatures of the candidates, and they sold them as collector's items. Surprisingly, people loved them. The project earned them around $30,000, just enough to keep Airbnb running for a few more months. More importantly, it showed the creative spirit that would define the company's future: resilience, imagination, and the ability to find solutions even in the hardest moments. That small act of creativity became one of the symbols of the Airbnb journey, proof that determination and originality can keep an idea alive when logic says it should fail. With the money from the cereal boxes, Brian, Joe, and Nathan managed to keep their project alive a little longer. That was when they decided to apply for a startup accelerator called Y Combinator. The program offered mentorship, a small investment, and most importantly, strong guidance on how to turn ideas into real businesses. When they joined Y Combinator, one of the first lessons they learned was simple but powerful. To grow, you need to deeply understand your users. The founders were told to talk directly to the people who were using Airbnb, to visit them, listen to them, and learn from them. So that's exactly what they did. They started traveling across cities, meeting hosts and guests face to face. They took photos of the homes, talked about what was working and what wasn't, and improved the website one small detail at a time. It was hard work, but it changed everything. Through those personal conversations, they discovered what made Airbnb truly special. It wasn't about technology or fancy design. It was about people, about trust, sharing, and connection. Slowly, Airbnb stopped being just a website and became a community. And little by little, people around the world started to change their minds. What once sounded crazy, the idea of letting strangers sleep in your house, started to sound exciting. People saw it as a way to meet travelers, learn about new cultures, and even earn some extra income. By 2011, Airbnb was already operating in more than 80 countries. The company was growing fast. Every day, new hosts were joining, and more travelers were booking. And with every stay, new stories were being written. A student hosting a tourist to practice English. A retired couple sharing their house to pay the bills. A young traveler living like a local for the first time. The idea had become a global movement. People realized that traveling wasn't just about seeing places, it was about living experiences. But success also brought new challenges. As Airbnb expanded, some cities started to question its impact on local housing and tourism. Governments wondered if this kind of business should follow the same rules as hotels. There were discussions about safety, taxes, and fairness. For the founders, this was another big test. They had to learn how to work with different governments, listen to communities, and build trust while keeping the spirit of openness that defined the company. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Even with criticism, Airbnb continued to grow. It changed the meaning of the word home. A home was no longer just one fixed place. It could be shared, experienced, and lived by people from anywhere in the world. Between 2015 and 2019, Airbnb reached its peak of global expansion. Millions of bookings were made every month. The company became one of the symbols of what people called the sharing economy, a new way of doing business where ordinary people could use what they already had to create new opportunities. For many, Airbnb made travel cheaper, more authentic, and more human. People could stay in unique places instead of identical hotel rooms. They could cook, talk with locals, and feel like they truly belonged. But then came 2020, and with it, one of the most difficult moments in modern history: the pandemic. Almost overnight, travel stopped. Flights were canceled, borders were closed, and people stayed home. For Airbnb, everything changed in a matter of days. Thousands of hosts lost their reservations, and the company suddenly faced a crisis it had never imagined. For a moment, it looked like everything they had built could disappear. In that dark time, Brian Chesky decided to lead with empathy and transparency. He wrote a public letter explaining the company's decisions, announced painful cuts, but also created a fund to help hosts who had lost income. It was a moment of loss, but also a moment to remember what Airbnb really stood for: people helping people. The company used that crisis to reconnect with its original mission, to make people feel at home even in difficult times. During the pandemic, Airbnb reinvented itself. They started promoting rural homes and isolated stays, since travelers were looking for safe, quiet places far from the crowds. They also created online experiences, virtual events where hosts could share their culture, teach classes, or guide tours from home. That creativity kept the community alive when travel seemed impossible, and when the world slowly reopened, Airbnb came back stronger than ever. In 2021, Airbnb went public on the stock market in one of the most anticipated listings of the decade. Its value reached over $100 billion, making it one of the biggest companies in the hospitality industry. But even with all that success, the true magic of Airbnb wasn't in the numbers. It was in the millions of human stories created by its community. Travelers discovering kindness in strangers, hosts opening their homes and hearts, cultures meeting, languages mixing, and people realizing that the world wasn't so big after all. When we look at the story of Airbnb today, it's easy to see the success, the billions of dollars, the millions of users, the global recognition. But the real story lies behind those numbers. It's about the struggles, the failures, the late nights, and the moments when giving up seemed easier than continuing. Brian, Joe, and Nathan were not millionaires. They were not experts in business or technology. They were ordinary people with an idea and the determination to make it real even when the world said no. And maybe that's the most beautiful part of this story. It shows that innovation is not a gift for geniuses. It's the result of looking at problems in a new way and having the courage to try something different. While others saw strangers sleeping in strangers' homes, they saw human connection and a new way to travel. That simple change of perspective created one of the most revolutionary companies of the 21st century. Airbnb also teaches us that every successful business starts with empathy. The company didn't grow because of perfect technology or clever marketing. It grew because it understood people, their fears, their dreams, and their real needs. Travelers wanted experiences that felt authentic, and hosts wanted to share what they had, sometimes to earn money, sometimes just to connect. Between those two worlds, Airbnb built a bridge, and that bridge connected cultures, languages, and stories. Over time, the idea of belonging anywhere became the heart of the brand. No matter if you were in Tokyo, Cairo, or a small village in Brazil, the message was the same. You can feel at home anywhere in the world. That simple promise changed the meaning of hospitality forever. And behind the success, there's also a powerful lesson about learning. Just like in life, and just like when learning English, growth doesn't happen in one big step. It happens slowly, with consistency and patience. Airbnb didn't become a global company overnight. It grew one small victory at a time, improving, adapting, and learning from mistakes. That's the same principle we follow here on the channel. Small daily victories that over time become something great. Each word you learn, each sentence you repeat is like one more stay in your personal journey with English. At first it feels small, but one day you'll look back and see how far you've come. That's the beauty of learning through real stories. You don't just learn a language. You learn about people, ideas, and dreams that changed the world. And in that process, you change too. Learning English and building something meaningful have a lot in common. Both require patience, persistence, and heart. They're not about perfection, but about progress, step by step, moment by moment. So next time you hear the name Airbnb, remember this. It started with 2 friends, 3 air mattresses, and a dream to pay the rent. But that dream became a revolution because they believed in it and never gave up. And maybe your next big idea will also start small, with something simple, something you already have, and the courage to take the first step. Focus on the essential, because the biggest transformations always begin with small ideas made with heart and purpose.
I'm Alex, and this is Essential English Only. Keep listening, repeating, and developing your English every day. You really learned what matters. See you in the next lesson, focusing on the essentials.